The old garage at the end of Willow Street, it was raining the day Sundar's car broke down. Not the kind of soft rain that makes the world smell sweet, but the hard, punishing kind that makes you question everything. He had just finished a quiet drive through a small mountain town on his way back from a rare personal retreat, something he hadn't done in years. No security detail, no assistance. Just him, the car, and the silence he missed from his childhood. The road had narrowed and twisted like an old man's back. It had taken him through forgotten places, past empty barns and crumbling gas stations. He liked that. It reminded him of how far he'd come. He had just passed a faded sign that read, Willow Street, last exit for 15 miles. When the engine light blinked once, then again, and the car gave a low, stuttering groan. No, Sundar whispered. Pulling over, it rolled to a quiet stop in front of a weathered building with a sign that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 70s. The words were barely visible, but they read, Miles and Sons Auto Repair. The "and Sons" part was almost completely peeled away. He looked around. No one. Just the soft hiss of the rain on metal inside the garage. He saw an elderly man hunched over an engine, wearing a faded gray jumpsuit, his back curved like a question mark. He didn't notice Sundar at first. The man's hands moved like they remembered things his brain didn't need to anymore. Confident. Slow. Patient. Sundar stepped into the open garage doorway and said, Excuse me. The man didn't look up. Got a problem with your car? Yes. The engine just stopped. Pop the hood, the man said, still not turning around. Sundar did. And that's when the man looked up. His eyes were pale, not from age, but from years of sun. They scanned Sundar's face, but there was no flicker of recognition. He nodded once and shuffled toward the car. You got a name? The old man asked, peering under the hood. Sundar, he replied. Sundar, the man repeated. You ain't from around here. No, just passing through. The old man wiped his hands on a rag and reached into the engine. You got any plans today? Not anymore. That made the man laugh, a dry, brittle sound. You do? Now, this ain't a quick fix. She's tired. Been through a lot, like most of us. Sundar nodded. Do you know how long it will take? Depends, he said, pulling out a piece and holding it to the light. On whether you want me to fix it right or just make it run for a bit till it right. The man looked at him then, and for a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Approval, maybe, or memory, then leave it here. There's a diner up the street. Nancy'll give you coffee. I'll call you when it's done. Sundar hesitated. He wasn't used to handing over control, but something about the man's presence made it feel okay. Thank you, he said. The old man nodded and turned back to the engine. The diner was almost empty, except for a woman in her 60s behind the counter and a young boy drawing spaceships. In a notebook. You must be the 1 mile son, the woman said. Coffee? Yes, please, Sundar said. Sitting down, she poured him a cup. You look like someone. He smiled. I get that sometimes. Nobody important, I hope. Folks around here don't like important. And then I'm definitely not, he replied. Sipping his coffee, she laughed. I like you. Back at the garage, the old man, Miles, was still working when Sundar returned hours later. You waited, Miles said without turning. I had nowhere else to go. Miles smiled to himself. That's the best reason to stay anywhere. How much do I owe you? Sundar asked. You don't, he said. Not yet. Come back in a week. If it still runs smooth, then pay me what you think it's worth. Sundar blinked. Are you serious? Boy, Miles said, turning to look him dead in the eye. Money don't tell me much. Honesty does. A week passed. Sundar couldn't stop thinking about the garage or Miles or the way he had fixed the car. Like it was a living thing. He had met thousands of people in his life, but something about that old man stayed in his mind. On the 7th day, he returned. He walked into the garage just as before, but this time, Miles wasn't alone. Someone else stood beside him. A tall man, quiet, familiar. Yellow and He turned, surprised to see Sundar. Miles looked between them. You two know each other? Elon stared at Sundar, then at the car, then at Miles. And said, what did you do to it? Asterisk, the man who fixed more than engines. Garage smelled of oil, rust, and something older memories, maybe. Maybe even regret. Miles stood between Sundar and Elon, his hands in his pockets, his old boots squeaking softly as he shifted his weight on the dusty concrete floor. His face was calm, but his eyes moved back and forth, reading the room like he'd just stumbled onto a story written in a language he hadn't spoken in years. Elon's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the car. It was still the same model, still the same body. Yet something about it felt different. The silence stretched for a few seconds longer than comfort allowed. What did you do to it? Elon asked again. Slower this time. Miles didn't answer. All right, away. He walked past the two men, reached into a drawer near his workbench, and pulled out a small cloth. He wiped a bit of grease from his fingers, then turned back around. Fixed it, he said simply. Elon took a few steps closer to the car, crouched, and opened the hood. His hands moved with the familiarity of someone who had built rockets, satellites, electric engines, and artificial intelligence. He didn't need to be told what to look for. He knew when something had been tampered with. He knew when something had been transformed. He stared at the engine for a long time, and then he did something strange. He laughed, a short, quiet laugh, not sarcastic, not amused, surprised. You rebuilt part of the control system by hand, he said. Miles nodded once. Yep. Elon pointed to a carefully rigged part of the engine. That's a bypass using analog logic. That hasn't been done in decades. Nobody does that anymore. People stop doing a lot of good things, Miles said, shrugging. But just because it's old doesn't mean it's wrong. Sundar watched them both carefully. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he knew one thing: he hadn't told anyone about this garage. Not his team. Not his assistants. Not even his wife. So how had Elon found it? How did you know I was here? Sundar asked. Yellow and didn't look at him. He kept staring into the engine like it had whispered a secret. I didn't, he replied finally. I came because my car broke down 2 miles from here. Same road. Sundar asked. Yellow and nodded slowly. Miles crossed his arms, clearly amused. Funny how the road breaks things when it needs to bring people together. Elon stood up and looked around the garage. He touched the edge of an old rusted toolbox. It was covered in stickers from the 60s and 70s peace signs, racing stripes, a faded photograph of a young man in uniform holding a newborn. This place, Elon said, it's like a time capsule. Miles grinned. Nah. A time capsule keeps things buried? This place? It keeps things alive. Sundar couldn't help but feel something stir in his chest. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't pride. It was something else. A deep warmth. Like discovering a part of the world that still made sense. The kind of place that didn't care who you were or how many billions you were worth. It only cared about what you left behind when you were done. You know who we are, Sundar said softly, finally asking the question. Miles nodded slowly. Of course I do. You think I'm deaf and blind? But I didn't care when he showed up, he said, pointing to Sundar, and I don't care now. Elon tilted his head. Why? Miles walked over to a small framed picture on the wall. It showed a young man in grease-stained overalls standing beside an old Mustang. Next to him was a boy, maybe 8 years old, holding a wrench like it was a sword. My son, Miles said. He used to be like you. Always building, always dreaming. But somewhere along the way he got caught up chasing more. Faster, bigger, better. Left this place. Said it was too small for his ideas. He turned and looked at them, eyes damp but unashamed. Then he crashed his bike outside Phoenix. Never got to finish that engine he was working on. Never got to slow down. The room fell silent. Sundar, single quotes. Breath caught in his throat. He didn't know this man, not really, but suddenly he felt like he did. He saw it now why the old mechanic fixed the car like he did. Why he didn't charge money. Why he didn't care about names or titles. He was repairing more than machines. I came back here after that. Miles continued, fixed up the garage, started taking in what was broken. Cars, kids, even myself. He looked at them with a kind of tired wisdom that only comes after loss. Some people build rockets. Some build search engines. And some of us just keep things running until someone finds their way back. Elon sat down on a stool, the weight of Miles' words sinking into him like stones. He ran a hand through his hair. You rebuilt this car with parts that shouldn't work together, he said finally. But it drives smoother than anything I've touched in months. Miles grinned. Sometimes it's not the part. It's the hands that put it in. Sundar smiled too, but it was a sad smile. He had spent his whole life chasing perfection, chasing speed, innovation, efficiency. But he realized in that moment, sitting in a dusty garage on a road forgotten by time, that he'd been missing something soul. You ever think of teaching what you know? Sundar asked suddenly. Miles laughed, a deep laugh this time. I've been teaching every day since my boy left. Just not to the kind of students you're used to. Elon looked around. What do you mean? Miles walked to the back room and came out with a small photo album. He opened it on the workbench. Inside were pictures of teenagers, some smiling with grease on their cheeks, some holding tools with pride. One page was signed with a shaky scrawl. Thank you for giving me a second chance. They come here, Miles said, after school, after trouble, after jail sometimes. I don't ask why. I just ask if they're ready to fix something. Do they pay you? Sundar asked. Miles shook his head. They pay attention. That's all I need. Elon closed the hood slowly, with a strange reverence. You're doing more here than any school I've seen. Miles shrugged. I'm just doing what my hands remember. Later that evening, the three of them sat outside the garage, drinking coffee from old chipped mugs as the sun dipped behind the hills. The wind was soft, and for a moment, everything felt still. I thought I came here by accident, Elon said quietly. No such thing, Miles replied. Sundar looked at both of them. What if we could do something with this place? Miles raised an eyebrow. What if we helped it grow? Sundar continued, not to change it, not to modernize it, but to let more people find it, like we did, to give more kids a second chance. Elon nodded slowly. We could build a foundation, fund scholarships, bring in apprentices. Miles smiled, but it was a sad smile. You boys always want to build things fast. Only because the world's breaking fast. Sundar replied. There was a long pause. Then Miles said, I'll think about it. The next morning, Sundar woke early and went for a walk. The streets were still quiet, the shops closed, the wind carrying the scent of pine and rain. When he returned to the garage, Miles was already working. But something was different. A car was parked outside. Not just a car. A sleek, black Tesla. Not Elon's. Another one. A woman stepped out. She was dressed simply, but carried herself with precision. She looked at Miles, then at Sundar. My name is Lena, she said. I heard about the mechanic who doesn't care who you are. Miles wiped his hands on his rag and nodded. You heard right. She looked around. I need something fixed. Miles walked toward her, squinting at the car. Engine? No, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Me? Sundar and Elon exchanged glances. Something was happening here. Something bigger than all of them. And Miles, without hesitation, simply said, then let's begin. Asterisk the weight beneath the surface heath. Morning sun filtered through the clouds like fingers parting a veil, casting soft golden light over the worn pavement outside the garage. The old sign that read Miles and Sons Auto Repair hung motionless, its faded letters glowing faintly in the light, as if remembering their own past. Inside, the rhythmic sound of tools clinking, gears turning, and breath held in quiet concentration filled the space like music. Sundar stood to the side, leaning against the wall, watching everything unfold with a stillness he hadn't felt in years. This place was different. It pulled something out of people. It disarmed them without trying. Maybe it was the dust in the air or the silence between conversations. Or maybe it was just Miles himself, the way he spoke, the way he looked at people without trying to solve them, only to understand. Lena stood across from Miles now, her hands slightly trembling, though she tried to hide it. She was in her late 30s, but her eyes carried a heaviness that didn't belong to her age. There were faint lines beneath her eyes, not from laughter, but from long nights, missed chances. And the weight of keeping too much inside. Miles didn't ask her what was wrong. He just handed her a rag and pointed to a half-disassembled carburetor sitting on the workbench. "Start cleaning this," he said. "Use the toothbrush for the small edges." Lena blinked. "I don't know anything about cars." "Good," he replied. "Then you won't mess it up with what you think you know." She looked at the rag, hesitated, then took a dot near the back. Elon stood by one of the old engine blocks, his fingers tracing the grooves like they were ancient scripture. He wasn't the same man who walked into the garage the day before. There was something gentler in the way he moved. Less calculation. More curiosity. As Lena began cleaning, slowly at first, then more confidently. Miles returned to Sundar and leaned against the wall next to him. "You know, it's funny," Miles said, watching Lena. "Most people walk in here looking for someone to fix something they broke. But what they don't know is they're usually carrying around pieces that never fit right in the first place." Sundar nodded slowly. "She's not here for the car, is she?" "No," Miles said. "She's here for herself. Just like you. Or just like he was." "Elon? Came in here yesterday with a broken car and a head full of questions he thought had answers. Now look at him, listening." They watched as Lena paused, holding the toothbrush delicately between her fingers. She wasn't cleaning anymore. She was staring into the part, her breathing steady. Something in her had shifted. Sundar broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," Miles replied. "What's your secret?" Miles smiled. "I don't fix cars. I listen to them." "You mean engines?" "No," Miles said softly. "People." As the day wore on, more cars rolled into town. Not many, just a few. An old couple in a rattling pickup that hadn't seen a mechanic since the last recession. A young man with a bright red hatchback and eyes that looked too tired for someone barely 20. They came because they had heard. And word, as it always does in towns where nothing ever happens, spread fast. But what they found wasn't just a mechanic shop. It was a place where time slowed down, where people listened, where nobody asked what you did for a living. They asked how your heart was holding up. Elon spent most of the afternoon working with a teenage boy named Marcus, who had been coming to the garage for 3 months. Marcus was quiet, sharp, always watching. He had a gift for understanding systems. He could take apart an engine diagram and rebuild it from memory. Yet he had been expelled from 3 different schools for talking back, not listening, and not following the rules. "You ever think of building a prototype from scratch?" Elon asked him. "I think about it," Marcus said. "But thinking don't make it real." Elon handed him a notebook. "Then let's start making it real." Miles watched from a distance and said nothing. But he smiled to himself. Meanwhile, Lena was still working at the bench. She hadn't stopped once. Her eyes were focused now, but something deeper was changing too. Her posture, her breathing, her presence. Sundar walked over slowly, gently. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, not looking up. "I've never cleaned anything this small before." "You're doing great?" She paused, her hand still. "My brother used to fix bikes," she said quietly. "Before he left, he always told me that the smallest parts matter most. But I never believed him. Why not?" "Because I thought he was wasting his time. I thought the world only cared about big things, big names, big wins. I told him he needed to do more with his life." She looked up, tears gathering but not falling. "He died in a street race, trying to prove he wasn't small." Sundar felt the weight in her voice. He had heard confessions before, had read resumes filled with trauma masked as accomplishment. But this was something different. Raw. Honest. I'm sorry. He said, I came here because my car stalled near the mountain curve, she continued. And I remembered a friend telling me about this place. Said there's a man who fixes more than engines. Miles, who had been pretending not to listen, finally stepped forward and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You believed him? Yes, Lena nodded. Then we'll fix it, Miles said. Not just the car. By evening, the garage had changed. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was alive. The walls seemed to breathe. The lights glowed warmer. The people inside moved like they belonged, even if they didn't understand why yet. Outside. Under the wide sky, Sundar, Elon, and Miles sat on the porch again. This time, Lena joined them. They sipped tea from mismatched mugs, and the silence between them felt like a friend. I want to fund it, Elon said finally, whatever this becomes. A place for second chances, apprenticeships, a real home for those who need one. I'll match it, Sundar added, but only if we let it stay exactly like this. Miles leaned back, eyes closed, soaking in the quiet evening air. You boys ever heard of a seed library? He asked. What's that? Lena said. It's a place where people check out seeds instead of books. Plant them. Grow things. And when their plants bloom, they collect the seeds and return them so someone else can start again. Elon smiled. You want to grow people like seeds? No, Miles said. I wanted to give them soil. Just then, Marcus ran out of the garage, a paper in hand. Elon, he called out. You gotta see this. Elon stood up and walked over. The boy handed him a sketch rough but detailed. It was a concept for a new type of engine, part electric, part analog, a hybrid of the future and the forgotten .elo and single quotes SIs. This is incredible. You think it could work? Marcus asked. With the right hands? Elon said. Absolutely. Miles, watching from behind, said quietly, and with the right hearts. The stars began to appear one by one. Lena sat on the steps, head tilted back, breathing in the stillness. Sundar stood beside her, arms folded. You know, he said softly, I think this might be the most important place I've ever been. She smiled gently. Me too. And just then, the phone inside the garage rang. A landline, old and stubborn. The kind you had to answer. Miles walked in and picked it up. Miles' garage. He said. A pause. Then his face changed. Serious. Quiet. He nodded slowly. I understand. He hung up .elo and stepped inside. Everything okay? Miles looked at him. That call, he said, was from someone in Washington. Government? Yeah. Someone high up. What do they want? Miles turned to face him, the shadows of the garage crawling across his tired face. They said they heard what we're doing here. And they're sending someone tomorrow. Elon's eyes narrowed. Who? Miles looked out the window toward the night. Someone who doesn't want this place to exist. Asterisk, the man in the black suit next morning arrived slowly, with gray skies and a cold breeze rolling down from the mountains. The usual calm of Willow Street felt different. A kind of weight hung in the air. Not fear exactly, but tension. The kind that presses down on your chest before a storm. Sundar was the first to arrive at the garage. He stood outside for a long moment, watching the horizon, where a single dark car moved steadily up the hill. Inside the garage, everything looked the same. Tools lined the walls in quiet obedience. The smell of grease and dust still lingered, familiar now, almost comforting. Marcus was already working on the electric analog hybrid sketch he had shown Elon the night before. His hands moved fast, eager, hopeful. Lena was at the bench, her movements slower than yesterday, but more deliberate. Like someone who had learned to breathe again. Miles moved around the garage, like he always did, unbothered, calm. But Sundar noticed it right away. The way he occasionally glanced at the clock. The way he wiped his hands a little longer than usual. The way he hadn't cracked a joke all morning. You sure about this? Sundar asked as he stepped inside. Miles nodded slowly. Some storms you can avoid, others you have to stand in. They didn't speak again for a while. Outside, the dark car came to a slow, deliberate stop. It was a long black sedan with no badges, no plates, and tinted windows that seemed to drink in the light. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, the kind that made it clear he didn't come to fix anything. He walked slowly toward the garage, his footsteps silent on the cracked pavement. He carried no bag, no folder, no briefcase, only a small pin on his lapel, barely visible. A tiny eagle dot Miles met him at the edge of the garage. "You must be Mr. Miles," the man said, his voice smooth and quiet, like he'd practiced sounding. "Harmless. Just Miles," the old man replied. "You the one they sent?" The man smiled faintly. "They didn't send me. They asked if I'd like to have a look. I said yes." "That's worse," Miles said, folding his arms. "Means you're curious. Curious folks are more dangerous than angry ones." The man chuckled. "You've been busy. Unusual repairs, unsanctioned apprenticeships, multiple high-profile visitors. This place has gotten attention. You ever fix a carburetor?" Miles asked. The man blinked. "Excuse me? A carburetor? You ever taken one apart?" "No. Then you got no business judging what happens in a place that does." The man's smile vanished. His eyes shifted slightly, and his voice lost some of its warmth. "I'm here because powerful people are asking questions. You've had 2 billionaires in this garage in under a week. That doesn't happen by accident. You think I called them?" Miles asked. "Someone did, or something drew them here." Miles didn't flinch. "Yeah, broken cars." Behind him, Elon and Sundar stepped outside, followed closely by Lena and Marcus. They stood together, not in defiance, but in quiet solidarity. The man in a black suit looked at them, one by one. His gaze paused a second longer on Marcus, then flicked back to Miles. "You're not running a licensed school," he said. "No training permits, no safety clearances, no federal oversight. You're teaching minors here." "I'm not teaching," Miles said. "I'm showing." "Call it what you want," the man replied. "But the government has rules, and you're breaking a few of them. You ever been broken?" Miles asked suddenly, his voice quieter, now that the man blinked again. "What? You ever wake up one day and realize you lost yourself trying to be what someone else needed?" "I don't think that's relevant." "It's more relevant than you know." The man in the black suit exhaled slowly, clearly trying to stay calm. "Let me be clear. I'm not here to shut you down. Not yet. But if this becomes something larger, if funding starts moving through here, if more kids show up, you'll trigger audits, investigations, possibly criminal penalties." "So that's the warning?" "Yes. And what do you suggest I do?" Miles asked. "Keep the garage. Fix the occasional car. Stay small. Invisible. Safe." Miles looked past him toward the hills, toward the town that had forgotten itself over the years, and then back to the man. "Safe doesn't fix what's broken," he said. The man sighed, sensing he wouldn't win this round. He pulled a small card from his pocket and handed it to Sundar. "Call me when you're ready to talk seriously. Funding dreams is easy. Keeping them legal is hard." He turned, walked to his car, and left as quietly as he'd arrived. The garage was silent for a long while. Marcus broke it first. Was that guy serious? Could they really shut us down? "They could try," Elon said, "but they won't," Sundar added. "Not if we do this the right way." Lena stepped forward. "And what's the right way?" Miles looked at all of them. "The right way is never fast, but it's honest, and it keeps its hands dirty." The rest of the day passed in a strange rhythm. Work continued, but it was different now. Every screw tightened, every wire connected, every bolt replaced felt like an act of defiance. A promise. They weren't just fixing cars anymore. They were building something deeper. A movement. A refuge. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, the group gathered behind the garage for dinner. Someone had brought soup. Someone else had found old folding chairs. They ate in silence at first. The kind of silence that holds gratitude. "I've been thinking," Lena said finally, stirring her bowl. "About what you said." "About soil?" Miles looked up. Double quotes. "I want to help plant," she said. "I don't know much." but I know how to organize, how to write, how to fight systems when they try to crush people. Then you'll be our roots, Sundar said. Marcus added, and I'll be the wire. The one that keeps everything connected. I'll be the spark, Elon said. Just don't expect me to sit still, Miles chuckled. And I'll keep the lights on. Later that night, when the stars returned and the wind whispered through the trees, Sundar sat alone outside the garage. The same wind that once made him anxious now felt like a lullaby. He remembered his early days' cold offices, hot screens, endless meetings. He remembered the loneliness of achievement, the echo of applause that meant nothing when the room was empty. This place, it had no applause, no headlines, but it had people. And somehow that felt more permanent than anything he'd built before. Deep in the night. After the others had gone, Miles walked to the back of the garage, to a small wooden box tucked behind a stack of tires. He opened it slowly and pulled out a photo. It was of a boy 10 years old, greasy hands, wide smile. His son. He stared at it for a long time, not crying, not smiling, just remembering. Then, as the wind passed over him, he whispered, "They're ready." And the photo, worn and silent, said nothing. But it didn't need to. Asterisk roots in the dust morning came slowly, heavy with fog and the smell of early dew. The sun tried to break through, but the clouds clung to the sky like secrets. The garage, though still quiet, felt different now. Not quieter, but fuller. Like the silence itself had grown thick with purpose. Something had changed since the man in the black suit left. Not just in Miles, but in everyone. Sundar arrived first again, carrying a small box of parts he'd ordered from a specialty supplier. They weren't essential, not really, but they were rare, old-world components that couldn't be found in modern garages anymore. Copper wires, hand-forged connectors, analog resistors, things with fingerprints and history. He placed the box on the workbench, running his fingers along the edges. It wasn't about the parts. It was about the gesture. He wanted to contribute, not with ideas or strategies, but with something real. Something you could touch. Elon showed up not long after, still dressed in simple clothes, carrying coffee for everyone. He looked more like an engineer than a CEO now. Hair uncombed, eyes tired in a good way. Like he'd been awake all night chasing a dream he finally wanted to hold with both hands. You didn't have to bring all this, Sundar said, eyeing the coffee and the stack of notebooks under Elon's arm. I didn't, Elon replied, setting everything down. But I wanted to. Miles came out from the back, rubbing his hands on a rag as always. He looked at them both and gave a nod. Not a greeting and acknowledgement. The kind of nod you give when you know the people in front of you aren't visitors anymore. They were part of the place now, part of the soil. Lena arrived next. She wasn't dressed like before. Gone were the neutral tones and quiet caution. She wore a denim jacket now, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand, eyes clear and determined. We have forms to file, she announced as she entered. Nonprofit status, apprenticeship documentation, educational grant proposals, and we're going to need to register the property if we want any legal protection. Miles raised an eyebrow, amused. You saying we're going to be legal? I'm saying, she replied, smiling faintly, that we're going to make it impossible to shut us down. What's your title now? Elon asked. Lena thought for a moment. Just put gardener. I'm planting seeds. Marcus walked in behind her, holding something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing the prototype engine they'd been working on. It was beautiful in its own strange way, rough, uneven, but full of promise. Parts old and new, blended together, a reflection of the garage itself. It works, Marcus said softly. At least in theory. Elon stepped closer. You test it? Not yet. I wanted to wait. I thought maybe we should do it together. Miles smiled, eyes narrowing as he studied the engine. You sure it's ready? No, Marcus said, but maybe that's the point. They spent the next few hours preparing for the test. Sundar installed the mount. Lena made notes. Elon wired the ignition system. And Marcus stood nearby, both nervous and proud. Miles didn't say much, he just watched. Like a father watching a child take their first step, knowing full well they might fall finally. The engine was mounted on the old steel test bench out back, the ignition key in place, the wiring humming. Quietly, everyone gathered around. Ready? Elon asked. Marcus nodded. Sundar turned to Miles. You want to do the honors? Miles shook his head. This ain't my engine. Marcus stepped forward, hands shaking slightly. He placed his fingers on the switch, closed his eyes for a moment, and then turned it. The engine sputtered, then coughed. Then roared. Not loud. Not clean, but steadied out a sound like resilience. Like something forgotten coming back to life. Cheers broke out. Sundar clapped Marcus on the back. Elon laughed, fist in the air. Lena stood there, hands to her mouth, eyes wide. Miles didn't cheer. He just stood quietly and watched the boy's eyes. Because that's where the real sound came from. Marcus turned to him. We did it. No, Miles replied, his voice soft but strong. You did it. And now you know what your hands can do. Later that evening, they gathered again. This time, not on the porch, but around a fire pit they had built using old scrap metal and bricks from behind their garage. Someone brought marshmallows. Someone else brought an old guitar. They weren't celebrating the engine exactly. We're celebrating each other. What they had built, not just with tools, but with time, patience, and trust. Miles sat in his usual spot, sipping coffee from the same old chipped mug. He looked around at the faces glowing in the firelight. Not employees, not students, family. This is what my son dreamed of, he said quietly. Everyone turned. He used to talk about places like this. Not schools, not factories, but spaces. Open places, where people could come no matter who they were and just learn, fail, not for grades, not for profit, just to remember they could. He paused, the fire flickering in his eyes. I never understood it back then. Thought he was wasting time dreaming. Now I see it. I see him in all of you. No one spoke for a while. They didn't need to, but as the fire burned low and the night grew cold, something shifted again. A distant sound. Tires on gravel. Not fast, but deliberate. A second black car pulled up. Different than the first. Older. Quiet. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. Older than Lena, younger than Miles. Short silver hair, firm eyes, dressed in a dark navy coat. She didn't smile, didn't introduce herself. She simply said, "Which one of you is Miles?" "That'd be me," Miles said. Standing up. She walked closer, glancing at the others, taking in the fire, the laughter, the homemade engine sitting nearby on the bench. "I heard about your engine," she said. "You with the government?" Sundar asked. "Not anymore," she replied. "But I still have influence." Miles narrowed his eyes. "You here to shut us down too?" "No," she said. "I'm here because you've got something important." And important things. They attract the wrong kind of attention. "So what do you want?" She looked at the engine. Then at Marcus. "I want to help," she said. "Why?" Elon asked, skeptical. She hesitated, because once, a long time ago, I wanted to build something like this. A place where people could be human, not numbers, but I chose the wrong path. I made deals, compromises. Now I want to set something right before I'm too late. Miles studied her for a long time. "You got a name, Nora? You got tools? In the trunk? And come back tomorrow," he said. "Early. We start before the sun." And just like that, she nodded, turned, and got back in the car. As her headlights vanished into the distance, Marcus turned to Miles. "You trust her?" Miles shook his head. "No, not yet. But sometimes you have to give people a wrench and see what they do with it." That night, Sundar couldn't sleep. He walked behind the garage to the ridge overlooking the valley. The stars were bright again. He stood in the dark for a long time, thinking of nothing and everything. Yellow and joined him, hands in his pockets. This place, Sundar said quietly. It's more than what we thought it would be. Yeah, Elon replied. It's a blueprint. For something we forgot we needed. You think we're ready for what's coming? Elon didn't answer right away, Doc. Then he said, doesn't matter. It's coming either way. They stood in silence watching the sky, and somewhere behind them, in the soft hum of the garage, the prototype engine started again, on its own, without a touch. Dot, as if it had a heartbeat. Asterisk when the dust finally settles next morning arrived. With an unnatural stillness. Not the peaceful kind that wraps around your shoulders like a blanket, but the kind that makes birds go quiet and wind hold its breath. Miles felt it before he even opened his eyes. A shift. A turn in the road that had no signs. He stepped out of his small room behind the garage, wearing the same faded jumpsuit, same coffee-stained mug in his hand, same creaky boots on the same old floor. But today, everything felt heavier. The others arrived one by one, Lena with her papers and determination. Sundar with a half-eaten sandwich and dark circles under his eyes. Elon with no coffee, no swagger, only silence. Marcus with a toolkit so neatly organized it looked like a museum exhibit. And then, as promised, Nora, early, sharp, prepared. But quieter than yesterday. They all gathered around the workbench without a word. In the center sat the prototype engine. No one had touched it since last night. It had started on its own. That strange low hum still echoed in Sundar's ears. But they didn't talk about it. They weren't afraid. Just waiting. Miles broke the silence. Today's not about fixing. He said, today's about deciding. Lena looked up. Deciding what? Miles set his mug down. Whether this thing we built stays small and safe, or whether we let the world see it. And take the risk that it gets stolen, twisted, broken? Elon sighed. You mean whether we protect it or we share it? Miles nodded. Sometimes. They're the same thing. Sometimes they're not. Nora stepped forward. I've been making calls, she said. Quiet ones. There are people who'd support this. Quietly fund it, but they'd want control. Naming rights. Access. Strings, Sundar said. Yes, Nora replied. And if we say no? Elon asked. They'll bury it, buy the land, change the law. We've all seen how it works. Number? One spoke for a long moment. Then Marcus said something that surprised everyone. What if we go public? Miles raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Make noise. Big noise. Show the world what this is before anyone else can twist it. Stream it. Post it. Tell the story our way. Lena hesitated. That would be dangerous. It would draw every kind of attention. But it would be honest, Marcus said. And there it was. The truth sitting in the middle of the room, raw and stubborn. They could nurture it in secret. Keep it pure. Or they could risk everything to let it breathe, let it grow, let it belong to more than just them. Miles looked at the boy and smiled. You ready to speak for it? I built it, Marcus said. It already speaks for me. By noon, the garage had transformed. Sundar set up a camera on a tripod. Lena drafted a statement. Elon worked on wiring the test bench to a monitor that could stream the engine's output live. Nora made final calls to contacts she trusted, just a few. People who remembered how to listen. Miles didn't touch a single tool that day. He just walked around, watching each of them work. He wasn't a leader anymore. He didn't need to be. They had taken the flame he'd carried for decades and turned it into a fire that didn't need his breath. At exactly 3:47 p.m. They went live. No press conference. No flashy logo. Just Marcus standing in front of the camera, engine humming. Softly behind him and the garage in full view. My name is Marcus, he said. And this is something we built. His voice shook a little, but he didn't stop. I didn't learn this in school. I learned it from a mechanic who never asked me who I was. Only if I wanted to build something real. He stepped aside. Sundar stepped in. This garage isn't a company. It's not a product. It's a place where people fix things, including themselves. Then Elon. This engine shouldn't work. It's made from old parts, analog logic, salvaged components. And yet, It runs cleaner, smoother, and smarter than most commercial models. Lena followed. We're not asking for funding. We're asking for space. Space to grow, to teach, to protect the forgotten. Not everything needs to scale. Some things just need to survive. Finally, Miles. He stepped into the frame, eyes soft but steady. I've fixed engines my whole life. They talk if you listen. They tell you what they need. People are the same. All we've done here is listen. He paused, then added, this is not a pitch. It's an invitation. And with that, they ended the stream. Asterisk, the response came faster than any of them expected. Within hours, the video had been shared across every platform, picked up by journalists, engineers, teachers, and even former students who had drifted away. From the world of machines, they received thousands of messages, offers, threats, praise, disbelief, asterisk.